Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Prime Minister, Mr. Farid Zakaria, friends, colleagues, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Let me begin by paying tribute both to our security forces and to men and women in uniform from many countries among our allies, particularly the United States. And of course, Australia, where a museum in Sydney honors those brave soldiers and officers who fought shoulder to shoulder with us. Over 1 million American men and women in uniform have fought with us, lived with us, and it's an extraordinary pleasure that when I see them, they say they've left their heart in Afghanistan. This is an extraordinary tribute to our people, because the welcome that the people of Afghanistan have accorded to our international partners is unique. We're at a moment of change, a radical change in context. And we have two ways of having a conversation. One is to dwell on the past, another is to take stock of today and this opportunity and really focus on the prospects of the future. Briefly on the past. When I was sworn in as Afghanistan's president, we dealt with a radical uncertainty as our overwhelming context. President Obama had publicly announced that American troops will be reduced to 600, and departure was proceeding very rapidly, per our desire. And as the person who had headed the security transition, I was determined to finish the security transition in Afghanistan, which we did on time on December 31, 2014. Our first attempt in that context was to raise the issue of peace. And peace for us is meant a double process of peace. First and foremost, peace between the states of Afghanistan and the states of Pakistan. This peace is fundamental to creating stability and following that prosperity both in South and Central Asia. So I reached out, and we all reached out, the Government of National Unity, my colleague Dr. Abdullah, all my colleagues. But unfortunately, the last 2.5 years were not productive on that quest. Instead, we had to fight. And I hope it has become clear that the Afghan security and defense forces have fought with determination, with valor, and with distinction. Let me just highlight how some of our forces are doing extraordinary things. On May 31st this year, 5 Afghan policemen at the diplomatic quarter in Kabul saw a truck bomb heading towards the German embassy. It was a question of decision of minutes. They decided to sacrifice themselves, causing the truck to implode before it would hit the German embassy. Hit the truck, hit the German embassy and its surrounding embassies, Kabul probably would have had the unfortunate distinction of entering the Guinness Book of Records as the slaughterhouse of international diplomatic prisons. These men did not hesitate. This type of story recurs with enormous regularity. We have fought hard because we had to. But also, what is extraordinary is that in a moment of fighting, we've been able to carry significant reforms. And the reform of the Ministry of Defense is a tribute again to the imagination of my colleagues. Particularly, I'd like to single out Mr. Atmar, my colleague National Security Advisor, and my other colleagues for their enormous work to making sure that one of the most successful generational transitions in our history and security forces is underway. Our Minister of Defense is under 40. He is not part of the generational quarrels of the 1980s, 1970s, 80s, and 90s. This generational transformation is taking place both in the civilian and security sector in Afghanistan, and it is quite significant. So the news, because always the question is asked, this percentage of country, that percentage of country, under whose control, etc. What I want to put the equation is simple. The Afghan army has been able to take every single district within days. Our problem has been holding. And holding has been because our police is not substantially reformed and is not in the capacity. But this is changing, and hopefully we'll be able to move. So coming to the present. But before that, the dominant characteristic of the president is what I call the fifth wave of political violence. Terrorism is not new. Mr. Zakaria has written on this, he knows a lot better. But beginning with anarchism, this is the fifth wave. What is new is the way. All previous waves were based on secret societies, face-to-face networks. This is a Facebook-to-face, faceless networks. It is an extraordinary combination of transnational networks, transnational criminal organizations, and transnational cyber security linkages. What we need to take account of is if the previous waves are to go by, this is not going to be a phenomena or a challenge of a year or two. It is more likely to be a challenge of a decade or 2 decades. The politics necessary, the international coordination necessary to deal with this requires a different perspective, and I hope we can rise to that challenge. The other components of the security are regional and domestic, and in that context, I'd like to welcome the announcement of the South Asia strategy by the Trump administration. The number of troops. So first, clarifications. The increase in the number of troops is modest. Second, I want to assure every American parent that American forces are not going to be involved in combat. The security transition is not being reversed. The increase in troops is within the limits and understandings of the bilateral security agreement and the strategic partnership agreement. What is new is bringing all instruments of American power to the equation. It's the combination of diplomacy and also economic engagement that makes this distinctive. Because of this, the opening is to a comprehensive dialogue between Afghanistan and Pakistan on the one hand, and in the context of the quadrilateral dialogue between Afghanistan, Pakistan, United States, and China on the other. It is a unique opportunity for the leadership of Pakistan to discuss with us the legacy of the past and a determination not to repeat the past, but to overcome the past. Securing the future of South Asia is enormously significant because tens of millions of people who live today in poverty as a result of our common understanding could see their pathway towards prosperity. As Mr. Brad said, the role of the Asia Society across. But we look at Asia being located at its heart. And being at the heart means something very simple. The Asian continental economy will not come together unless Afghanistan is made whole. the shortest way between different parts of Asia is to go through Afghanistan. And what we focused on, and this again is a significant difference, all our neighbors, near and far, with the exception of Pakistan until now, have been engaged in a very intense and productive dialogue. That dialogue in the context of this strategy will be intensified and we'll be able to move forward. The goal, the overarching goal of the strategy into which the Afghan government and people are dedicated is a political settlement. And this political settlement, again, is two parts. One, state-to-state understandings and the primacy of state-to-state relationship in contrast to reliance of non-state actors, particularly malign non-state actors. And second, an offer of political dialogue to Taliban. It should be clear to various Taliban groups that they cannot win in the military field. Were it be possible, it would have happened in the last years where we were fighting under enormous constraints. Today, with the support and clarity of support that is provided, a military victory for them is impossible. Second, they need to realize that they're losing the people of Afghanistan. Each atrocity that is committed, each violation of human rights, each attack on a mosque, a shrine, a village, a women's network, etc., is alienating people further. We need, however, to prepare our society for peace, because peace must lead to stability. It's not every type of peace that we seek, but a peace that can bring enduring stability to us and to the region. To make sure that an Afghan can prove an Australian wrong, I end my comments and I welcome Farid Zakaria for a conversation.
Mr. President, it's a great honor for us to do this. Can I just take advantage of this moment to ask people to turn their cell phones off? It may have been all right to have a few go off during the Asia Society part of this, but on television it really sounds bad. So if you could do that, and if you would, I ask the indulgence of the audience in one respect, which is I'm going to ask some questions, and I encourage President Ghani to answer, making some of the same points he's already made. For the tens of millions of people who are watching on television, they will not have had the privilege of hearing President Ghani's speech. As a good politician, I imagine you understand that your best points are worth repeating and repeating and repeating. But what I thought I'd like to do, Mr. President, let me start by saying, welcome, President Ghani.
Well, it's a pleasure to be with you. Thank you for what you're doing for global engagement and dialogue. You are a voice of reason and understanding, and it's a pleasure to interact with you.
You're trying to soften me up. And
that has never worked with you. So it's meant genuinely.
Let me begin by asking you a few personal questions. You're an academic by training. You've worked in the development field, in the World Bank. You've lived as a scholar in the United States. Here you are, the president of one of the most difficult war-torn countries in the world, with incredibly complex tribal politics, corruption, international politics with the United States, Russia, China. How difficult was that transition?
It wasn't difficult. It was close to impossible. No, seriously, I'm an accidental president, because my life has been a preparation for this job. I spent 14 years of my life looking at the last 600 years of Afghan history. I've traveled to every single province of Afghanistan during the security transition. I know the history, the feelings, I hope, of each segment, each strata of Afghan population. And I was raised on patriotic textbooks, a sense of Afghanistan as an entity with 2,000 to 5,000 years of history, a place where the poetry of Rumi still sounds, where Khushal Khan's call to action still echoes, and where Amir al-Shir Nawai's call for justice is still very prevalent. The second part is my country needs representation. And the other part, which has been, the World Bank, Johns Hopkins, Berkeley, etc., comes to use because we've had a problem. We've always won in the battlefield, but we've not been able to represent ourselves and speak for ourselves politically. Now we are capable. We have an entire generation that is connected and is able. And the third area is reform. I inherited a system where corruption was the system. So tackling it, articulating and moving, and arriving at a sense, our problems are chain linked. And when you have chain link problems, the weakest chain determines your momentum. But you had to sequence, and prioritizing has been immensely. Where I'm privileged and has made the job much easier is the team, the interaction and the ability to discuss. So we've created fora, they're called councils, where we really are discussing and coordinating. And when I look at the face of young soldiers, I'll give you a very small vignette to allow other questions. It used to break my heart. Each time I went to the Army Corps, the cadets were shorter than me. The problem of stunting in our country. I've been through 6 Army Corps last month. For the first time, I'm finding soldiers and non-commissioned officers that are taller than me. This is a vote in the future. They're fit, and it reflects. So to win the world for those who do not have voice, which is the absolute majority of the Afghans, 40% of our people live below $1.35. But to deliver on the aspiration is an inspiration that keeps me going.
So everybody knows you are spotless. Even your worst enemies don't accuse you of corruption. But you preside over what is regularly regarded as one of the most corrupt countries in the world. How do you change that? And how do you function effectively without being corrupt? If the corruption has been the grease that made Afghanistan work, aren't you handicapped by your honesty?
No, because corruption is not made Afghanistan work. Corruption robbed us of 2 chances. The first was after 9/11. The people of Afghanistan had hope. I traveled all across Afghanistan. I went after 24 years. On 26th of December 2001. I traveled 10 provinces of Afghanistan without any school. It's corruption that took away the hope. And second, one of the largest interventions in history under President Obama's first term took place in Afghanistan, but again, the Afghan elite did not do its job. So to make the argument that corruption greases the wheels and make it function, no, it's the opposite. It's deprived the majority. It has exacerbated the gap between the rich and poor, and sudden wealth it came